Yo, what is up guys? Delboy here, aka Blue Collar Sports TV. Hopefully you guys are doing well. If you're new here, smash that like, hit subscribe, all of that good stuff. So, as I'm sure some of you guys are aware, Dillian Whyte is now clear to box following an investigation in regards to his failed PED test prior to the rematch with Anthony Joshua. Of course, that rematch never happened because of his PED failure, but the Texas Commission have come out and said that Dillian Whyte has been cleared. The reasoning they give is that the failed test was due to a contaminated substance. Apparently, a forensic investigation took place, and they found that a supplement was contaminated. So, yeah, that's the reasoning the Texas board gave for giving Dillian Whyte his license back. Apparently also, I've read this online, that Dillian Whyte is now seeking damages against that supplement company for loss of earnings, things like that. So we'll see how that goes. But Dillian Whyte is granted a license by the Texas boxing board, and he is now free to resume his career. What I didn't know, I never knew Dillian Whyte wasn't fighting on a British license in the first place. Maybe I've been out of the loop, but I just assumed Dillian Whyte was fighting on a British license, but apparently that's not been the case for several years. Obviously, he had that other issue with PEDs when he failed, when he failed a test prior to the Oscar Rivas fight. I'm assuming he's not had a license or a British license since then. But yeah, he's now licensed by the Texas Boxing Board, so he is free to resume his career. I'm assuming that if this is indeed a contaminated substance issue, like the Texas board are saying, Dillian Whyte should have no issue fighting again in the UK, because I'm assuming he's going to have supporting paperwork proving that, proving the investigation, etc. Ultimately, boxers fight in the UK on foreign licenses all the time. It's more unusual for a British fighter to fight on a foreign license, but it's happened in the past. In fact, Tyson Fury, I believe, is still fighting on a Nevada license, even when he fights in the UK. I actually never knew Dillian Whyte fought on a foreign license, but it is what it is. But yeah, I mean, he's free to resume his career. The question I would like to ask now is, 35 years old, Dillian Whyte has had a hard career. He's been knocked out badly on a few occasions, in brutal fashion. And yeah, coming back at 35 years old, I do wonder what fights are out there for him. I mean, don't get me wrong, there are fights out there for him, but what fights can he be competitive in, and what fights can he still win at any real level? Because when I look at Dillian Whyte, I've seen a guy in recent years whose punch resistance is getting significantly worse. He seems to be getting hurt more fight by fight. And even in his last fight with Jermaine Franklin, to me it looked like at times he was really forcing his work, really pushing his punches out there with no real snap on them. To me it looks like Dillian Whyte is regressing physically, And I know Dillian Whyte never had a long amateur career, and he's not had a super long pro career, but the knockouts he sustained have been relatively bad. Plus before, he was involved in kickboxing, etc. So Dillian Whyte has sustained a lot of damage over the years, and yeah, I certainly think he's a fighter on the downslide. What fights are out there for him? One fight I wouldn't be shocked to see happen would be Dillian Whyte versus Daniel Dubois. I think Frank Warren would jump at a fight like that. I think it's a good profile building fight for Daniel Dubois. And right now, considering where Dubois is at, considering where Dillian Whyte is at, it's a fight in which most of us, including myself, would make Dubois a favourite in, Coming off a win over Jarrell Miller, where he somewhat redeemed himself following the Usyk debacle. Good performance in that fight. Dillian Whyte represents a name, he's got a lot of notoriety. That fight would do okay in my opinion, and stylistically, it would be a good fight for as long as it lasted. Dillian still has a punch, he still has a left hook, and as we know, Daniel is susceptible He can be hurt himself, and he's got a questionable heart. So maybe that makes that fight interesting, just because Dillian can punch, just because Dillian does have experience and he does have heart. That's one thing I will say about Dillian Whyte. He does have heart, so maybe Whyte versus Dubois would make a lot of sense. Maybe even Dillian Whyte versus Joe Joyce. Joe Joyce is coming back relatively soon, I believe this month at some point. He's fighting a tune-up in Cash Ali. Joe Joyce is going to go through Cash Ali like a doorway. Maybe once Joe Joyce comes back, wins that fight. Maybe in the summer, we can have Joe Joyce versus Dillian Whyte. I think that fight would be fun enough. I would make Joe Joyce a fair favourite in that bout, a big favourite in fact, but listen, Dillian can punch. Who knows? Maybe Joe's chin has been cracked. It's a fun fight in my opinion. These are the sort of fights I would be targeting for Dillian Whyte. Because ultimately, listen, Dillian as a top level contender is pretty much done, I would say. So you may as well chuck him in there with domestic rivals, even if he is the underdog, like a Dubois, like a Joe Joyce. They're the sort of fights he should be targeting because, number one, they're fun fights, in my opinion. I think they're fun fights. And while I expect Dillian to lose those fights, if he were to pick up a win, he once again, regains a little bit of momentum if he were to beat a Joe Joyce, especially Dubois right now. If he were to kind of get a win over one of those guys somehow, puts him in a good position once again. So for me, Joe Joyce or Dubois next for Dillian Whyte. I don't particularly want to see a Chisora third fight, a trilogy fight. Maybe Top Rank could have a look at Dillian Whyte and make Jared Anderson versus Dillian Whyte. I don't think Dillian Whyte would take that fight personally, but, Jared Anderson needs step-up fights. And in my opinion, Dillian Whyte, even now, would be a step up for Anderson. So, listen, there's fights out there for Dillian Whyte, in my opinion. It's just what makes sense, I guess, right? And I think a big domestic fight makes sense. Joe Joyce or Daniel Dubois. Who knows, man? Maybe Ben Shalom makes Dillian Whyte versus Hughie Fury on Sky Sports pay-per-view. Who knows? But there are fights out there for him, in all seriousness. Anyway, share your thoughts below. Beanie Guy Del Boy, peace.